Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Cure. I'm Seema Kumar. I'm the CEO of Cure. And if you're wondering what Cure is, Cure really is our aspiration and our ambition to do something bold and bring people together around, the big mission that we have, which is to advance healthcare and to cure, period. That's why there is a blue period next to Cure. They say it takes a village to make something big. It can take a community. Well, to cure and to advance healthcare is going to take in a whole ecosystem. And so our goal in building the community and the ecosystem is to not only have dialogues, but to bring people in together around this mission to cure and to advance healthcare. So thank you all for joining us. And today, for Tuesday Talks, we have a very, very special treat. And we have Jim Geraghty, who is here from Boston, to share with us some really incredible experiences, but also advice for anybody who is thinking about starting a company. Jim is legendary, really, because first of all, you should know that he's a strategic leader in biotechnology and company building. But in addition, he has more than 20 years of experience working at, the famous Genzyme, which was led by the famous Henry Tamir. And Jim was, Henry's right hand, but also was, involved in Genzyme for a very long time, was a president of Genzyme Transgenics, which was another thing we want to talk about, and also Genzyme Europe. But beyond that, I think Jim is now a strategic leader. He's on the board of many, many, many companies, and I'm looking through an endless list of boards: Orchard Therapeutics, Pierce Pharmaceuticals, Voyager Therapeutics, Fulcrum Therapeutics, Cambridge, and of course, you're also the director of the BioVentures for Global Health, that's BVGH, and which is a global health non-for-profit. And earlier you were an entrepreneur in residence at Third Rock Ventures, and then senior VP Global Strategy at Sanofi, which of course is another big pharma company. And you started your career as a consultant at Bain, and graduate of Yale Law School with a master's in psychology from Penn and a bachelor's from Georgetown. Really, really impressive credentials. So you're going to share with us your thoughts, but more than anything else, the big news of the day is also that you have now a new book, right? And I don't know if you guys have all seen, the book is right there. It's called Inside the Orphan Drug Revolution, The Promise of Patient-Centered Biotechnology. I mean, we talk about this a lot, but at the end of the day, I think the healthcare system and all of the breakthroughs and everything will only be impactful if the patient is at the center of everything that we do. And we're going to talk about that with Jim. So first of all, tell me, what is the Orphan Drug Revolution?
Well, Seema, first of all, thank you for that extremely gracious invitation. I think I should probably just quit right now before I go any further. That was very gracious of you, but I'm glad you started with the introduction to the Cure,
yes,
because it's really a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here today. I've known Deerfield for many years, and it's great to see some friends at Deerfield who I've known for 30 years here, and the wonderful work that Deerfield is doing, and the wonderful work that you're trying to do with the Cure and starting to do with the Cure. And I had the pleasure, with your help and other of your colleagues, to meet several of the young entrepreneurs and physician scientists here today, and it's remarkable to see the energy and the aspiration that they have and that you're trying to bring together here. I think it's the best of what we try to do in this community, and it's really a privilege for me to be joining you in trying to do that. So thank you for the invitation. So to your first question,
yes,
the Orphan Drug Revolution, it comes to the question of what are orphan drugs, and as I think probably most people here know, they're drugs for orphan diseases. And what are orphan diseases? They're generally, in colloquial terms, rare diseases. And the reason they were called orphan diseases is because prior to the passage of the Orphan Drug Act in 1983, almost exactly 40 years ago this month, they had been orphaned, abandoned by a pharmaceutical industry that had kind of lost its way in those years and had become very focused on short-term profit maximization and had abandoned the search for really tough scientific problems and taking on really difficult and life-threatening diseases because some of the populations were too small. And so the Orphan Drug Revolution, which was sparked in part by the Orphan Drug Act, in part by patients and entrepreneurs and physician scientists, has led to a sea change to the degree where today there's a very vibrant community of people around the world working to treat and develop therapies for more and more of these rare diseases.
That's great. So the book that you've just written, where did the inspiration come from? Why did you decide to write this book?
I was inspired by several things. It's been a privilege for me to spend my career in this field, and I was inspired by many of the people that I worked with, whose stories I thought deserved to be told, pioneering physician scientists and entrepreneurs who worked against the odds and worked with incredible dedication to bring these therapies to fruition. I was also inspired in part by a book that came out just before this and also published by Cold Spring Harbor, who I'm also pleased to see here this evening, which was a biography, more or less, of Henry Tamir, which I would recommend to all of you here tonight as well, called Conscience and Courage. And having seen that book, and which is a wonderful book telling Henry's story, who really was in many ways the father and the founder of the Orphan Drug Revolution. And at the end, as that book was being finished, I felt that there was a broader story to be told. And that wasn't the purpose of that book, but I felt that that story deserved to be told and people should know it. And I thought that I would see if I could try to do it justice.
So what's your hope with this book? What do you hope will happen with this book?
Well, the hope at one level is to tell great stories that hopefully can inspire, another generation of entrepreneurs and physician scientists. There's also a broader aspiration, which is the broader public. If we take for granted the Orphan Drug Revolution, it is at risk. It's not guaranteed to go on forever. And every day, there are attacks in the media on drug pricing. And there are organized interests in insurance industries and others who are constantly lobbying on Capitol Hill to cap drug prices or lower drug prices, and without a recognition of the impact that will have on innovation. And today, as we speak, as many people in this room know painfully well, we are in a real drought of investment in biotechnology and in rare diseases, in part because of that, and because of other policies that need to be addressed. And so the Orphan Drug Revolution was sponsored and driven by families and people who cared about their children. And if people don't know about that, we're at risk of losing the momentum to sustain future innovation.
You bring up a really great point because, sometimes when you think about things in abstract and concepts and policy and law, it doesn't bring to life the real life stories of people, children, their parents, patients. And you talked about stories. You have some stories in your book. Is there one particular story that stands out for you more than any other?
There are some wonderful stories.
I know that they all don't have happy endings, right?
No, they don't all have happy endings, that's for sure. As everybody in this room knows, they certainly don't all have happy endings. I mean, there are several stories. I would point people to, there are three in the book that I think, to me, kind of frame it. The book opens with the story of Abby Myers, often called the mother of the Orphan Drug Revolution, whose son had a rare disease and led her to go to Congress and lead the patient activism that led to the passage of the Orphan Drug Act. It ends with the story of Julia Vitarello and her daughter Mila, who sadly passed away after receiving a remarkable, effective, but unfortunately not sustainable therapy for a so-called N of 1, an emerging field of treatments for a single individual genetic defect. But the story that I think might be of greatest interest to the people in this room was a story in the middle of the book about a boy named Brian Berman, who was a 3-year-old boy at the time. And Roscoe Brady was a well-known leading investigator at the National Institutes of Health who had been studying a disease called Gaucher disease that most people had never heard of. And Dr. Brady had been studying it for 20 or 30 years, and he had identified the enzyme that was defective, glucose 3-peroxidase, in Gaucher patients. And then he wanted to do, and sourcing the drug was a miracle in its own right because it's a trace element found in minute quantities in human placentas. So Dr. Brady, with the help of what became Genzyme, had to gather thousands of placentas to treat an individual patient. And he gathered all this, and then he did a trial with 7 patients. And in 6 of the patients, the drug showed no effect whatsoever. In one of the patients, the patient had a miraculous recovery, clearly recovering from this debilitating, nearly fatal disease. And so why was that? It turned out that the 6 patients who were originally enrolled were all adults. The 7th patient